Hey lads, Mills from MTG back again with some Modern on Budget, and today we're talking about a very weird mix between Cat Combo from Standard, Scrap Heap Scrounger from Mono Black Aggro a few years ago in Standard, and Modern Dredge. Now, there are like a few highlights of all of those decks in here, and it's a weird combination at first, but once you look at it, it works really well together. So, the biggest card I'd say that brings this deck together is Desecrated Tomb. Now, Desecrated Tomb is a 3-drop artifact that says, whenever one or more creature cards leaves your graveyard, create a 1/1 black bat token with flying. Now, what that's going to do is that's going to allow us to do a lot of graveyard shenanigans, whether we exile things from our graveyard, or we bring it to our hand, or we bring it to the battlefield. That's all going to trigger this and give us more bats. Now, ways that we're going to get use out of this, though, first, we're going to have ways to fill our graveyard. Then we're going to have profits out of our graveyard, and then we're going to talk about specific combos. So, first up is ways to fill our graveyard. We have Stitcher Supplier that says, whenever it enters the battlefield or dies, put the top 3 cards of your deck into your library, into your graveyard. What that's going to do is that it's just going to enter the battlefield, mill ourselves 3, and then when it dies, mill ourselves 3 again. We have ways to sacrifice it, or we can just use it to block or attack. Now, this is going to be a very, very nice piece to fill our graveyard. As you can see, it's $16 for the playset, and it is well worth it. Next up, we do have Viserys here, so if we have things on the battlefield, technically we can consider this filling our graveyard, but we do have a way to put stuff into our graveyard. Next up is Golgari Thug, which, well, actually, Viserys here is very nice because we do have Graveyard Recursion, and so if our opponent's trying to exile a creature, we can sack it in response. Next up is Golgari Thug, which is Dredge 4, and that's how we fill our graveyard. But also says when it's put into the graveyard from play, put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your deck. This is going to allow us to get a little bit of extra value. Maybe a combo piece or 2 gets destroyed, and maybe we want it back. So we have this, and it helps us get our creatures back, and it also fills our graveyard. Next up is, I believe is that really all we have to fill? No, we have Witch's Oven. So Witch's Oven is another way of filling the graveyard, and so it's really meant for a combo, but you can sack creatures. This is more for dodging removal. But the combo with this is going to be Cauldron Familiar. So whenever Cauldron Familiar enters the battlefield, each opponent loses life and you gain 1 life. Then you can sack a food to return it from your graveyard to the battlefield. And if you played in Standard at all this summer, this past summer, you will understand my hatred for this card. But also, I think that its value in Standard could be replicated in Modern. It just needs to find the right shell. And I think, honestly, this is one of those shells. Because, every time this comes back from your graveyard, Desecrated Tomb is going to trigger. And every time Golgari Thug leaves your graveyard to dredge, because when you dredge, you put it from your graveyard to your hand, you're going to trigger Desecrated Tomb. And so, those are a bunch of ways that you can trigger Desecrated Tomb, and there's more. So, next we have Priest of Forgotten Gods, which says tap, sacrifice 2 other creatures. Any number of target players lose 2 life and sack a creature. You add black and draw a card. Quick side note, that draw card can technically be used to dredge, so if you're overzealous, then obviously go for it. You can dredge even more. Otherwise, you can use it to just draw your card. We have no form of artifact recursion, so if we wanted to, I could definitely see going heavier into blue specifically in the lands, and then having not adding any blue spells to the deck, obviously, but having more blue lands, like Water Graves, whatever. and then having Academy Ruins, because Academy Ruins could grab Desecrated Tomb or Witch's Oven from our graveyard and put it on top of our deck. But we don't have that, but if you're looking for an upgrade path, that's how I would go. But Priest of the Forgotten Gods, you can sacrifice creatures and bring it back. One of the creatures that we can bring back is Scrapheap Scrounger, and one of the things we can sacrifice is also Scrapheap Scrounger. So the idea is we sacrifice Scrapheap Scrounger and some other creature. Let's say we sacrifice Prized Amalgam. Which, real quick, Prized Amalgam, whenever a creature enters battlefield, if it entered from your graveyard or you cast from your graveyard, this comes back tapped at the end of your turn. So this works with Cauldron Familiar and with the combo I'm about to tell you. It does not work with Thug, sadly, but it does work with the combos. So Scrapheap Scrounger is going to be pay 1 and a black, exile another creature card from your graveyard, return Scrapheap Scrounger from your graveyard to the battlefield. Now you might think, wait, but that exiles our graveyard and we need all those creatures in our graveyard. Well, that's true. It's very true. And I know, like, Priest of the Forgotten Gods requires you pay... Well, it does give you that black, so you do get that free part. But the exiling is not free at all. So you eventually will be exiling out your graveyard unless you've used Golgari Thugs and Stitcher Supplier to mill yourself enough that you have Eternal Scourge in your graveyard as well. Because Eternal Scourge you can cast from exile. So the idea is, let's say you have Scourge in your graveyard, and then you have, because you milled it or something, then you have Scrapheap Scrounger and Prized Amalgam and Priest of the Forgotten Gods on the battlefield. You tap Priest of the Forgotten Gods, sacrifice Scrapheap Scrounger, sacrifice Prized Amalgam, add black, and draw a card. You'll draw a card normally, and then use the black to activate Scrapheap Scrounger's ability to exile Eternal Scourge from our graveyard. Then Scrapheap Scrounger will come back to the battlefield. Then Prized Amalgam will trigger, which will return to the battlefield at the end of the turn. Then Eternal Scourge goes to your exile, where it can be cast. So it's just sitting in the graveyard, it can't do anything, but if you exile it with Scrapheap Scrounger, it can be cast. And we have other ways of being able to exile it in our sideboard, actually, for a bit more utility. But that is, 3 creatures leaving our graveyard? You know what that triggers? That triggers Desecrated Tomb. And all of those creatures leave the graveyard at different times. So it's not the one or more. They're different times that they leave it. They happen all in the same part of the turn, the same section, the same stack, but they're different abilities. So you'll get 3 bats. And if you want in the future, you don't even have to sacrifice your Amalgam. You can even just sacrifice a bat. The Amalgam will come back, but you could even use the bat in the future to sacrifice along with the Scrounger and keep getting things back. But that is a very, very powerful combo right there. And it is a lot grindier and a lot slower than you might want to play in an aggressive metagame like we have right now. That being said, this is a very fun deck. I actually did not go against any aggro decks. When I say aggro, I didn't go against Prowess, I didn't go against Burn. The other decks I was fine against. So this was a very fun deck for me to play. But that's all the creatures. We have Inquisitions for hand hate, and we have Desecrated Tomb as one of our biggest cards that just is a glue that holds it together. And so it's really fun, and I really recommend playing this list. Next up, Aura lands, though. We have Barren Moor for cycling. This does allow us to dredge if we want to, but also just allows us to draw more cards. Clearwater Pathway as a black land, but if we want to, we can have it as a blue land just so that we have a way to hardcast Prized Amalgam, because Prized Amalgam is our only blue card in the deck. And so if we have Clearwater Pathway, then we're going to be able to just hardcast it if it's in our hand. Now, I don't want to focus on that too much because we're really focusing on bringing it back from the graveyard, but having at least a little bit of blue in the deck does allow us to say, okay, we aren't screwed if it's stuck in our hand. Next up is Dakmor Salvage. It's another tap land. I know 6 tap lands out of 18. A third of our lands are going to enter tapped. Honestly, that's okay. But Dakmor Salvage is going to allow us to dredge. It's going to allow us to do a little bit more if it ends up in our graveyard. And also, it's one of those cards that's like, okay, do we really want to be dredging here because we really want to hit a land drop? Well, no problem, because Dakmor Salvage is in our graveyard. Let's just dredge that, and now we have a land to play for our turn. Next up is 9 Swamps, because it's what the color our deck is. Next up, before we get to that sideboard, I just want to say that we do have our budget here, which is $98.26, and if you want to build it on MTGO, that is $28.79, and that's pretty cheap for a very, very fun deck. I will say that it may not be the most powerful deck, and it may not be tuned to perfection, because I can't tune every single deck to perfection if I want to publish these videos, or else I'd be doing like one a month. But I am more than open to hearing what you guys have to say down below about, hey, how can I improve the deck? Hey, what card did I forget? It might end up just not being a budget card, but I'm open to listening. But it's a very, very fun deck, and if you like this video, give me that thumbs up. I'm only getting a few thumbs up, and I'm getting more views, a lot more views than I am getting thumbs up. So please hit that thumbs up. It has no negative impact on you whatsoever. You're not going to get any annoying notifications from you liking a video. Anyway, next up, also, if you want to see more content, if you do want to get those annoying notifications like I do, hit that subscribe button. Also, a super easy thing. It takes one click if you're on the phone. It takes maybe a scroll or a click if you're on your computer. It has no harm in just hitting the subscribe, and it means a lot to me. Anyway, for our sideboard, we have Cling to Dust, which is Graveyard Hate, but also we bring this in if there's any card in our deck that's just not good. If there's just not a good card in our deck, like let's say Inquisition, let's say we're going against Tron, Inquisition's really gonna basically do nothing. We could do Cling to Dust, and we could have that as a way to draw cards. It's a way to draw more cards. It does have the exile gain 3 life, but it also has exile draw a card. So we do have a way to get extra use out of this. So keep that in mind. It's not just Graveyard Hate. Next up is Fatal Push as removal. Next up, we will have Inquisition Kozilek in case you do go against those more aggressive matchups. This helps us kind of run them out of gas quickly. And then we have Damping Sphere for, it slows down Tron, but not a ton, especially these newer versions. But it does, it really hurts Storm. It really hurts Storm. And then we have Ashiok Dream Render for actual Graveyard Hate and Titan Hate. So just recap, we have basically, this is going to be a flex spot. This is removal. This is aggro hate, combo hate, and graveyard and Titan hate. So that's the deck. As always, my sideboards are a recommendation, but you can always shift the list. You can always transform it into something brand new. There might be a card that is like a game breaker, something that just makes this deck go from like 0 to hero. Just that one card, and I could have easily missed it. So, because I am one mind. I'm one person building these decks. If you have any Magic Hive Mind, if you have anything, let me know. I won't be biting your head off if you say, hey, you should play this card. Honestly, I'm down for it. Let me know what you think below, and I will see you next time.